Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the final session of the 11th Annual Canadian Restaurant Investment and Leadership Summit, the Innovations in Restaurant Development panel discussion. You already know by now, my name is Dimitri Mazur. I'm with CWB Franchise Finance, your host for the summit, and I'm your virtual MC for this last piece of the sessions. Hope everyone's enjoyed the panels and sessions this week. We've had an absolutely awesome turnout with over 450 individuals tuning in throughout the week. We certainly hope you've taken away something interesting, meaningful, or even insightful out of the panels and sessions. So a couple quick items. We've got 45 minutes booked for this final panel discussion. And like the other sessions, you'll have the opportunity to submit questions throughout the presentation by typing your questions into the Q&A on the right-hand side of your screen. And we will address these at the end of the discussion or follow up with you directly after if we don't get to all of them. All the sessions are being recorded and uploaded in the platform for on-demand viewing. If you missed a session earlier this week, visit the Sessions tab and watch the replay at your convenience. We will keep access to the platform open for the next couple of weeks for viewing, but we will also be posting the videos publicly next week, and we'll share those links by email. And finally, you'll receive an email later today with a link to download a copy of the 2021 Canadian Chain Restaurant Industry Review, along with a link to provide your feedback on today's sessions. So briefly want to take the time before we jump into the session. We do want to take a moment to thank all of our sponsors once again. Their support and participation is critical for us to be putting on this summit together. So we do greatly appreciate it. And now to our final discussion of this 2021 summit, Innovations in Restaurant Development. Over the last 18 plus months, restaurant owners have demonstrated their creativity and nimbleness, shifting the designs and layouts of their spaces in the face of demand and obviously operational disturbances. From increasing outdoor dining, drive-throughs, and takeout windows to reconfiguring the overall dining room, incorporating retail space and implementing new kitchen technology, the physical space is continuously evolving and arguably faster than ever. So joining us today is a group of leaders in construction, design, and kitchen technology to discuss which trends are here to stay and what the future of restaurant development will look like. So a big thank you to this session's sponsor, Garland Canada, and I'm now going to pass it over to today's moderator, Andrew Neilson from Foodbuy, to introduce today's panelists and lead the discussion. Over to you, Andrew.
Perfect. Thanks, Dimitri. It is my pleasure to moderate today's panel discussion. We have a great lineup of panelists with a wealth of industry knowledge and years of experience both in QSR and fine dining spaces as it relates to innovation in restaurant development. So let's get to it. With me today are Mary Chiarot, VP and General Manager at Garland Canada, Craig Stanghetta, Principal and Creative Director at St. Marie, and Shon Jones-Parry, Director of Operations at Broadview Hotel and Gladstone House. Thanks all for being with us today. I do appreciate it. Before we get into today's discussion, I would like to ask each of you to tell us a little bit about yourselves, your backgrounds, and your organizations. Mary, if you want to kick us off here, that'd be great.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. Hi, Mary Chiarot. I'm with Garland Canada, which is a well-built company. We are a global manufacturer of commercial kitchen equipment, and we have a portfolio of brands, including Garland and Cleveland and Frymaster, as well as about 6 or 8 other brands within the Canadian market. Our business really is to deliver innovative kitchen and menu solutions to food service and hospitality operators. And it's great to be here. It's great to have this opportunity to be on this panel with Craig and Shon and really talk about what are things that we're thinking about in terms of innovation, both front of the house and back of the house, that really support dealing with the headwinds that all operators are facing, have been facing for the last 24 months and probably 2 years prior to that as well. So really interested in the conversation and thanks everybody for joining.
Thanks, Mary. Shon, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, thanks so much. Shon Jones-Parry, Director of Operations for the Broadview Hotel and Gladstone House. small collection of boutique hotels here in Toronto with a very heavy food and beverage. We have 6 food and beverage outlets between the 2 properties and 3 event spaces. And really excited to be a part of the panel with Mary and Craig as well. I've had the opportunity to work with Craig previously on some projects when I lived in Vancouver. And I'm excited for the discussion today.
Great. Thanks, Shon. Last but not least, Craig Stanghetta.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. I am Craig Stengett. I'm the principal of a design studio based out of Vancouver called St. Marie. We're hospitality and F&B focused studio. I'm also a co-owner of 3 restaurants and I guess 2 restaurants and 1 wine bar grocery store. And here in Vancouver, Savio Volpe, Peppino Spaghetti House, and Cafe Latana. And yeah, I mean, we're deeply engaged in where the world of food and beverage is going. And we're excited to be helping every scale of client kind of get there and meet the challenges and hopefully have a happy horizon on the other side of what's been a tough couple of years in the industry.
No kidding. I think everyone's looking forward to moving on from this, but no, it's great. Thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. We can get started here. So more so today than ever before, I think restaurants are trying and testing out different models of getting creative with how to go to market. Craig, can you expand on that a little bit and how that influences the design side of the business?
Sure. I mean, that's a pretty open-ended question in the sense that I think what we're going through is kind of a, maybe not a super accelerated wholesale transformation, but a pretty big transformation in the world of restaurants. And I think more than ever, people are trying to be as focused and nimble and accurate as possible about who they're servicing. And so I think we're starting to see all sorts of different models emerge, and those models are focused on different, geographic areas, and they just need to be really assured about who their end user is, who their customer is. So, everything from ghost kitchens to, one thing that we're starting to see a lot of is more sort of ticketed, focused, small restaurants again, which maybe returns us a little bit to that idea of fine dining where restaurants can get a level of assurance of how many covers they're going to have each night. Maybe they're going to, pre-sell a certain amount of seatings, either a prefix menu or a more limited kind of a la carte version. And so you can imagine that when you're able to quantify what that service is going to look like in that evening, that you start to be able to sort of unplug some of the more broad choices that are made for restaurant design. You could be almost a little more intimate with things. And I think there's a really exciting outcome from a design perspective there. You can imagine that, some restaurants could almost be more off the beaten path. They could find themselves in places that don't require as much foot traffic. Then they could be a little more intimate, almost like a dinner party in a way. And we're starting to have some really exciting conversations with some clients around really making an atmosphere that is more akin to a home kind of environment. And I would say that's at one end of the spectrum. And then at the other end of the spectrum, you have, for instance, we did a project in Austin a number of years ago called Loro with a company that runs a number of sort of more high-end Japanese focused outlets. They're called Uchi and Uchiko. And their whole idea was to do this super high level from a culinary standpoint. But it was a little bit more QSR. It was kind of a blended service model where people would queue up, order at the counter, and then they had this amazing sort of wood-fired grill and this really great pedigree for Japanese food. So they took Aaron Franklin, who's the sort of gold standard pitmaster from Austin, Texas, as a collaborator, and the Uchi crew. So the most sort of the best of the best when it comes to the culinary offer, but a super casual, more sort of kind of bar style service. And it was a breakout success. I mean, it's a little bit different again south of the border, specifically down there. They can have a lot of outdoor seating, so they leverage that sort of expansiveness and that kind of more, really less programmatic seating style. And so we're starting to see these different models emerge that have a really strong knock-on effect on how you design and sort of path people through space and wayfind and create, an atmosphere that supports these models. And so, just kind of like everything else in the world, there's a lot of polarity happening in what's working. And, it's both exciting and we got to stay on our toes because it's moving very quick.
Nice. Now, is that anything you've been able to incorporate into your own concepts, whether it be Pino's or any of the other two?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when COVID sort of happened, we kind of pivoted our cafe model to a grocerant or a grocery bar model where it was a lot of you sort of people would path in, they'd order at the counter. We would had some outdoor seating, obviously. Then there was, sort of multiple revenue stream style business, which was certainly not what our intention was when we opened. And so the entire concept became a lot more, certainly it was just a lot different and much more casual. It was a blended quick service dine-in kind of thing, and we kept evolving it over time as we would sort of be allowed to have more people in the restaurant. And so where we're at now, when the dust has settled, so to speak, is we're running it as a wine bar in the evening. It's still a cafe and grocery shop throughout the day, both pickup and delivery. So it really is a true hybrid model. And I mean, I'm sure we're not alone in this. We have a lot of clients that without the kind of, crucible of this kind of global pandemic, I don't think we would have had the fortitude to make all those changes so quickly and see them through. But on the other side of it, there's been some great additional revenue that we can capture. It's fun, it's exciting, it's a different model. And, we have talent that comes because they want to participate in that. And so, there are some silver linings, but we've definitely applied it, and I would say not necessarily by choice at first.
Right, but you've adapted, so that's good.
Yeah.
Shon, I don't know if you want to add to that. You guys at the Gladstone House have just gone under a pretty major renovation. How have you guys kind of adapted that policy, but that concept to the Gladstone House?
Yeah, I think like Craig brings up some really, really relevant points there. I think, Gladstone House was an interesting project for us, but it's a smaller property overall, but it has always been a very dynamic event space previously, encompassing different areas in the entire hotel. So we actually removed some event space to create more rooms for guest stays. Obviously, there's a balance in terms of your profit margins there and the rooms and F&B side. So we leveraged our ground floor space at the Gladstone, and really, we created a bistro that was an all-day bistro, but opened up and licensed the whole main floor so that if you were hosting an event, you would have access to the lobby, access to the bistro, so you could basically have a floor party or a hotel party in the entire space, which I think is something maybe unique and different. I'm assuming in the future be less unique and different for folks. And that also helps us leverage the bistro as well. So when we're at peak times, guests can spill into the lobby, very nice space, sit and enjoy whether it's a cup of coffee in the morning or a glass of wine in the evening. So those little changes have really helped us as we've reopened, really flex our spaces and open them up when we need them to be open, but close them off when we don't need them to be open, and be able to save on additional costs like labor.
Great. And it sounds like that's obviously been a better use of space overall since you guys have reopened.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, from a guest perspective, right, when they're coming into a space, if you're holding a wedding, for instance, which is, gangbusters right now, there's, there's a lot of demand for weddings right now, but, I'm sure everyone's been at a wedding where they've lined up at a wedding bar, a banquet bar, where it's, you have a choice of a couple beers, maybe a few highballs if you're lucky, and a red or white wine, right? So we're able to offer a full selection of cocktails, and a full selection of wine and beer, like should the bride and groom choose to do that, right? So I think like it allows us to do a lot more efficiently. And I think there's a lot more value for the guest in being able to do that, right? As opposed to, if it's an event, sticking them in the event space and holding them there for entire time, as opposed to allowing them to use the bistro, allowing them to use the lobby of the building, which is a gorgeous space and, isn't being really maximized at that point in the evening anyway. So.
That's great. Mary, I'm not sure if you have anything to add.
Well, I would say when it comes to space, I mean, one of the things that we think about back of house and what a lot of operators come to us asking us questions about really is how do we look at expanding our business, kind of modifying our menu, thinking about the kind of off-premise to-go concepts, and how do we manage that in the kitchen space that we currently have? Do we have two separate lines, for example, one that will feed the dining room, and then one that would feed the to-go or off-premise dining? And so from a space standpoint, back of house, that's a really interesting, conundrum based on the fact that kitchens have always been getting smaller. And so how do you create efficiency within that place and make sure that you're not having an impact on the guest experience? And so lots of activity, interesting conversation that happens around that. And a lot of it obviously has to do with kind of kitchen flow. What's your menu, both for on-premise and off-premise dining? And then also just how do we make the right flow of process and systems within the kitchen work to deliver what the expectation is of the operator? So lots of interesting stuff there from a space standpoint.
I agree. I think that's really interesting. I think, and back to Craig's point, I think talking about understanding the end user from a design perspective, right? And then the operator understanding who their end guest is going to be, right? And what that sales mix is going to be versus, in-house or takeout is really important. And I think, I think we'll start to see this more in a design process. I know, for instance, one of the projects Craig and I worked on in Vancouver, Botanist, we developed a cocktail lab to service these very high-end cocktails. But we also built a purpose-built bar to service guests sitting at the bar, but also the volume that's going to come in a busy bar and a busy restaurant, right? And I think, that, and whether it's in a front of house or Mary, like you're talking in the back house, I think, gone are the days where you sort of slap together a back of house space based on what your current chef thinks it should be and your general manager thinks the front of house space should look like. I think everything is going to be much more thoughtful and deliberate moving forward. And it'll have to be, I think, in order to be successful.
Mm-hmm. The other thing that's interesting is obviously the labor component. And, one of the things from two sort of ends of that spectrum is from the design standpoint, we're trying to look at how we're designing back of house with, being conscientious that there's people that need to work there 10 to 12 hours a day. We're trying to get natural light in those spaces. And so there's a real hard push pull there where we're trying to, being in Toronto or Vancouver where construction costs are crazy, or anywhere for that matter, based on what's happening with inflation and supply chain issues, that costs are obviously really high. Real estate costs are high. Leases, maybe we're getting a little breathing room on that to a degree, but traditionally have been very, very high. So there's a squeeze on back of house space, and there's been a premium obviously on front of house space. But what we're seeing is you need to have that balance where there needs to be adequate work area, access to basically some space, hopefully some natural light. And then on the other side of the spectrum, we're having clients that are looking at machinery to help with production. We did a project at the Yorkdale Mall for a company called Aburi Tora, and part of the assembly of the products all done robotically. Very consistent, obviously, and helps ease off the labor component. I mean, it comes at a premium in terms of the equipment cost, and you really do need to focus on the offer being almost that the lack of human touch is built into the concept, so that you're really setting clear expectations for the guests, that it really is, there's maybe maybe a bit more of a volume play there. And for us, when we did that space, we were thinking, can we create a sort of ethos or an environment that feels very futuristic, and that part of what the guest is appreciating about it is that there's a technology forward offer, that there's something that is the kind of the other end of the spectrum from a more traditional offer. And so we're seeing a lot of that obviously that push pull. And one of the things that I've got from an ownership standpoint is anything that you could do to build your internal culture is almost, if not the most important component of having a successful full service restaurant business these days. So the ability to look after the staff experience on an equal plane with the guest experience is certainly a trend that I don't see going anywhere.
No, sorry, Craig, you mentioned inflation being on the rise, and how important is it to maximize space and resources and supply chain than in recent years, than it is today?
Well, I mean, what we've been dealing with in Vancouver has been real estate prices and lease prices. And so although construction costs have been steadily increasing, we were really just mindful of, that there was just not a lot of room left in there, and we're trying to, keep our construction costs at bay. And so now with, material prices and supply chain issues and inflation, I don't think we felt the entire brunt of it, but it's certainly something that we're being extremely mindful of. And I think any hospitality-focused design or construction studio is, they're part of their responsibility is to be very aware of material costs, assembly details, wear and tear, and great material that gets the job done without breaking the bank. Because it's not a new thing that margins are thin in the restaurant world, but we gotta really knuckle down on that for sure in the coming. Immediately, essentially.
Yeah. Now, I think, Mary, maybe you could speak to that a little bit more with regards to if there was maybe like 2 or 3 areas where you could see the most advancement and innovation. What would they be, and what would the benefits be to operators, in that way?
Right. Okay. We regularly have operators, whether it's a QSR or an independent, at both hospitality and institution, having conversations about their operations, and whether it's currently a traditional kitchen and they want to move and advance forward. We have to think about, what is it they're trying to accomplish, and at what degree do they move beyond traditional, and what's available to them that they can embrace within their concept. So, major focuses of equipment innovation moving forward. And actually, we've been working on this for a number of years. It's just step change that we're making towards more advancement. One in particular is connectivity, really, which is kind of this whole cloud computing piece, which is, equipment having the capability to offer remote monitoring through the cloud, for management, for example, and managers can go on, operators can go on, whether it's the independent or the QSR, and they can understand things like what's happening with the refrigerators. It hasn't maintained the right temperatures over a period of time, or has it dipped and swayed? And obviously that has a factor on food safety and quality in the event that there is a power outage. You know, the other thing that isn't unusual for an operation is that when you're getting the delivery in, you prop open the walk-in cooler with, you know, a milk carton, and then you load it up, and then someone gets distracted and walks away. And well, what's happening there? Not only is it high energy usage, but it also can create food spoilage. And that's all cost to the operator. So being able to have an alarm system built in that lands on somebody's iPhone or tablet that says, hey, at this particular restaurant, you've got something happening with your walk-in that you can very quickly address, you know, remotely. And as a manager is kind of a cool thing to have at your fingertips. You know, that could be refrigeration. You could also look at, you know, your gas range, the heart of the kitchen, where traditionally 8 a.m. or 7 a.m. when you get in to start prepping for your lunch day part, you turn on your range full blast. And you're seeing the amount of gas go through that without actually anything being on the range for an hour or two. So how do you control for energy usage that isn't necessary, but really is driven by past behaviors? And so beginning to manage that, so that not only are you managing your carbon footprint, but you're also managing your cost at the same time. So all of that remote monitoring is a real critical thing as we look forward. The other piece is predictive maintenance. So you could have that piece of equipment starting to tell you when it needs your oil change. I mean, your cars do it now. How come you know your equipment can't do that? And we know that if a piece of equipment is maintained, not only will it operate better, it'll have uptime more than downtime, but it'll also perform for you the way that you need it to perform to deliver to your customers and your guests. So that predictive maintenance minimizes disruption and downtime, and improves efficiency of operation and the quality of throughput. So all of those things are beneficial to the operator. You know, kitchen management systems are also a real key thing. And all of this is data driven by the brains within those pieces of equipment that we're developing now. If you think about what's happening right now with oil prices, you know, a jig of oil and how much it's costing today versus 12 months ago, it's significant. So if you had a computer system built into your fryer that basically tells you when it's time, based on your cycles and the quality of your oil, to change it, then you're going to actually save money in the long run, because you're going to be replacing that oil when the quality requires it, not when, you know, the operator is saying, hey, I got half an hour to do that now. I'm going to do it now, when it really could have lasted for another week or two. So there's really interesting things that are happening. That data being driven from the piece of equipment is allowing us to do more so today than ever before. Another piece is, you know, what I call machine learning or artificial intelligence, which are things like virtual sensors. You know, this really gets to the labor component of challenges that operators are facing. High-speed processing, you know, it's food product recognition. When you open an oven door and you're putting in a tray of croissants or baked goods or muffins, and the piece of equipment recognizes what that food is, and within the system says, oh, they're croissants. This is the food program for croissants, and the piece of equipment recognizes it and automatically starts the process of cooking that product without really intervention other than the operator putting a tray into that oven. So some really cool stuff that's happening there. Voice activation is another, where you could tell the piece of equipment, here's what I'm putting in and here's what I want to do with it, or activate the croissant button, for example. And I'm being really fundamental here with my example. And then gold standard recipe profiles, you know, putting those in the brain of the piece of equipment. So an unskilled operator can operate that piece of equipment, and the skilled person has actually put all of the brain into the piece of equipment. Okay, so you don't have to have that. You don't have to have that chef standing there that has developed the gold standard to determine it. It's already in the piece of equipment as approved by your executive chef or your owner operator. So lots of interesting stuff when it comes to that artificial intelligence, machine learning that allows us to, you know, if you're a QSR, for example, and you want to put an LTO, limited time offer out there, how have you done that in the past? Well, you make sure that all of your franchisees have the information to go in and execute that at a store level. If you had a piece of equipment that through the cloud, you could drive that menu item, within 30 minutes, every store is now uploaded, and all they need to do then is bring the food product in and cook it to the gold standard of the chef that has developed that for that particular chain. I mean, think about how easy and efficient that would be in order to execute something and execute it consistently coast to coast if you're thinking about Canada, across a region, whatever that looks like. And then lastly, and I think Craig talked about this as well as Shon, you know, kind of what I call social security. And it's all about things that we do in the back of the house that ensures the safety and security of our employees. Really, sanitation, air purification systems, making sure that we have antimicrobial phenolics, handles, control boards, you know, that kind of thing. Modified airflow systems in the kitchen. And then also when we think about movement within the kitchen and minimizing movement within the kitchen, which is really let the equipment do the work, and you have fewer people within the kitchen actually having to execute that. So, you know, socially acceptable solutions that support back of house, that also support the safety and well-being, both mentally and physically, really, of our employees. These advancements in the back of the house, you know, are real innovations that address and deliver on, you know, a number of solutions to operators. You know, I mentioned labor challenges like, you know, scarcity of labor and skilled labor by having the brains within the piece of equipment, for example. Improved work environment safety, both of your staff, guests, as well as food safety when you think about overall improvements in, you know, detecting systems about when things go wrong. Operational efficiencies, proactively addressing processes, systems. I mentioned behavior early about the gas range and turning it on at 8 in the morning. And all these changes are our operators being able to understand, having access to data and analytics that allow them to better manage, you know, their operation in the facilities. Cost efficiencies, energy, food spoilage, labor downtime, and then overall, you know, sustainability. And all of these things lend itself to both employee satisfaction and guest satisfaction. And if you have both of those things, you're on the path to, you know, directionally, and, you know, going down the right path in order to support your operation and overall be successful.
Well, that's great points there. And I think that, you know, over the last, you know, 20 years or so, it's been a lot of focus on the front of the house. Now it's kind of, it seems like the next wave of innovation is shifting towards the back of the house there. Again, just kind of want to shift gears here a little bit. Where do you guys see the trends heading in terms of bookings and reservations? Because typically in the past, people would have called the restaurant directly, but there's definitely been a shift more towards online. I think Shon, do you want to give us some insight on that?
Yeah, I think that's evolved very quickly, and to Greg's point earlier about fortitude of turning a wine bar into a grocery shop and a cafe, I think it's forced you know, the open tables of the world to really develop their guest communication tools to streamline reservations, right? I think, you know, previously you'd have a reservationist in any sort of, you know, high volume restaurant environment, right? Sometimes two, sometimes a team, and you know, that's an easy position to eliminate with, I think, a lot of the technology that's come in and leverage that person in a more guest facing role. So, you know, I think things that have come through is being able to chat to the guest, right? So someone's trying to make a reservation online, they can have a direct chat with your host. It's more convenient than a telephone. While the host is seating the guest, they can start a chat. When they come back, they can seat another guest. They can answer the chat question. So I think that's been really helpful. I think we've seen, you know, 7 rooms and talk really push the envelope in terms of, you know, ticketing, right? We've talked about that a little bit in terms of, you know, having a guest pre-purchase their meal or pre-purchase their experience, whatever that may be. So maybe it's some of a smaller, more focused high-end restaurant that Craig was talking about. Maybe you have to pre-purchase your tasting menu before you come in. And I think other restaurants or bars will will leverage their experience. Maybe their food programming isn't at that level, but maybe they're doing something like a drag brunch, right? Or some sort of live programming that's happening that evening. And they can pre-sell tickets ahead of time, get cash in hand before the guests are even there, and kind of break up the cost for the guest and have more perceived value once the guest comes through the door. Less need for someone to collect cash at the door or a coat check or anything like that. So I think we're seeing a lot of sort of streamlining of things that we see in other industries that have really food and beverage has really caught up a lot, throughout the last 19 months. And I think going back to what Mary was talking about, there's a lot of analytics. There's a lot of information and data that's flowing through these systems that can allow operators then to turn around and market to these guests, allow operators to really look at leveraging, their hours of operation, their staffing levels, in both front and back of house. So I think these tools are really becoming very, very data driven, and helping operators make better decisions.
For sure. And I think it holds people accountable too, right? If you're going to make a reservation and have that spot kind of booked up, doesn't that?
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Like I think Mary and Craig can both speak to that as much as I can, but having someone's credit card on file, whether there's a threat of a charge or there's no threat of a charge, I think really helps. I know as recently as last night, I was talking to one of our GMs and we got burnt on a 16 top. And the only reason I know that is because I saw the total revenue of the night at the end of the night and it looked low. And he sent me a note and that's why, right? So that hurts, right? That hurts everyone. And we didn't, for whatever reason, we didn't take the credit card, and the one time you don't, the person doesn't show up, right? So I think what we're seeing as a trend, I think diners are being more respectful towards restaurants with that, which is great. But I think restaurants and bars just aren't willing to take as many risks with that anymore, and are going to increasingly require some sort of deposit, whether it's just a credit card or whether it's an actual financial deposit to come dine.
No, absolutely. I think, Craig, maybe if you have some more insight on that, but I mean, it makes sense. It's just like going to a sporting event, you buy your tickets, and especially in the, if you're going through fine dining and you only have 2 seatings a night and, a party of 6 or 8 doesn't show up, it does make a dent in the financials for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I don't really have much to add to it. I think it's pretty black and white. I think the interesting delta on this conversation is that the sort of more high-end fine dining is going to go to maybe a little more fixed, ticketed stuff, and they'll find the controls in that predictability. Mm-hmm. Whereas the more sort of quick service or volume-based restaurants are going to be very reliant on technology and data and quantifying as many choices and sort of winding down the drive for labor and certainly overly skilled labor. I mean, just as a pure reaction to the reality of what's happening in the labor pool. And then on the other side of it is that we have the luxury of having some of these tools catch up for this industry, where they've been very well leveraged in other industries before. And I think we'll certainly see that. I mean, we look at all that stuff with our clients, specifically on the on the quick service side of things, is where do we get the additional sort of order of magnitude little bits of savings or efficiencies, and small decisions add up to big impact. And I think that's what Mary said was a really amazing summary of how it's trending. And I just wanted to throw it over to her again for a sec, because before the call, she mentioned that a lot of their manufacturing is Canadian or North American based, which I also think is a real positive for for us folks here in Canada that do struggle with really long, lead times and difficulty in coordinating, receiving orders on pieces of equipment. And you can imagine, again, we deal with a bunch of independent folks as well as the large scale people, but with the independent folks, losing 8 weeks of operating income before you've even got going is very challenging for some of them. So.
Yeah, sorry guys, just a real quick reminder here for anyone that does have questions. If you guys are more than welcome to submit any questions. Marion, I think we've got about 4 or 5 minutes here left. If you want to pick up on what Craig was just saying there.
Sure. Yeah, I would say that my experience, and I've been with this business for 15 years, 10 managing the Canadian market, 5 in a global capacity, and we do have manufacturing facilities around the world. But I would say for the Canadian market in particular, part of our strategy is to make sure that we have equipment in country where we need it, when we need it. And we're not, what I call a box in, box out company. We're building product to suit the operator. So really it's made to order, customized, whether it's a complete island suite or a, pasta station that has refrigerated bases. We also have the, the 6-burner range and the standard fryers. So we have, a broad array of products. But I would say that, we're really pleased that we have a fairly significant manufacturing footprint in the Canadian market, which actually over the course of the last six years, we've quadrupled in size in terms of what we deliver. And those manufacturing facilities not only deliver into Canada, but they deliver for global consumption. So, they're contributing to the Canadian economy and employing Canadians to deliver products for us, which I think is an awesome thing, being a Canadian myself, and working for currently an American company. But making sure that we have product in country from whatever factory it comes from, quite honestly, is part of what our promise is to the Canadian food service market under our banner of Garland Canada. And I would say that the brands that we manufacture in Canada, which are Garland for global consumption, Cleveland and Lincoln. We have, significant success with those brands in the Canadian market and can turn those around fairly quickly. I mean, in today's, in today's global supply chain conundrum that we find ourselves in, everything is challenging. But I would say that we typically can typically turn around product for Canadian customers far more efficiently with the brands that we manufacture here, because we don't have, 4 weeks on the water from Germany or the UK, and we don't have probably the 2 weeks from, Shreveport, Louisiana for fryers into Canada. So there are definitely benefits to Canadian operators having manufacturing in Canada, but with the knowledge that for standard product we always carry inventory. And we clearly define, kind of what our lead times are. So we are highly sensitive to the fact that every day we miss is a day of revenue for an operator, and that's significant. So we're highly sensitized to that. And quite honestly, on my team, we have a number of people who have worked in the industry, who have owned their own restaurant, or they have run their own kitchens. That were executive chefs, whether it was institutional, hospitality, restaurants. We're all very sensitive to the fact that what we do and contribute into the kitchens, quite honestly, is meaningful in terms of the operator having and enjoying the livelihood that they choose. So all really relevant and interesting from the standpoint of making sure that we deliver what we promise.
No, that's great. I don't think we see enough of that, manufacturing still in Canada, to be honest. So that's good. That's good to hear that. Looks like we're almost about out of time here. Just one last quick question here for the group. Where do we see this? Any predictions as to where we see the future of? Oh, hang on a second. So I'm getting pop-ups here on one. Where we see the future of restaurant development and innovation going. And I'll go back to Shon real quickly before we have to close things off and hand them back to Dimitri.
Oh, it's on mute.
Shon, you might be on mute.
Oh, sorry about that, guys. It's a fairly broad question. I think what I would focus on is I think it's evolving fast enough where you can't just be a traditional restaurateur who focuses on product and hospitality. I think you have to be agile enough and curious enough to dive into the data and dive into understanding your business. There's two very successful, very talented restaurant groups here in Toronto that are facing major financial woes. And I think we'll see more and more of that for businesses that maybe ignore the data and ignore the evolution and focus solely on the hospitality and the product. And as a consumer, that disappoints me maybe a little bit. But as an operator, as a restaurateur, I think that it's really exciting times. And I think there's a lot of new tools coming online that are really going to help evolve our business and bring us into the future in a very, very interesting and very dynamic way.
Perfect. All right, guys, I think we are out of time. I do appreciate it. Hopefully everybody that attended got as much out of it as I did, because this definitely wasn't my area of expertise, but I definitely learned a thing or two for sure over the last 45 minutes and over the last week. Get to know you guys and the spaces that you operate. So I definitely appreciate it. So I will definitely take away what I can and pass it over to Dimitri.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks again to our panelists, Mary, Shon, and Craig. Greatly appreciate the discussion. So you are officially the last session today, so the sixth and final panel at this year's summit. So officially, this closes out the event. So before winding down today, I'd like to take a minute to thank everyone for joining us this week. It's been an absolute pleasure to be your MC and host the 11th Annual Canadian Restaurant Investment and Leadership Summit. We hope you enjoyed the sessions and can take something away from the discussions. So one last time, thank you again to all our sponsors for their support and participation. And thank you to all of our speakers for sharing their experiences, thoughts, and insights on the industry. I sincerely hope to see you all next year and hopefully in person. Have a great day, everyone. And thank you for your participation. Take care, be well, and stay safe.